So I'm going to start today's session with a short reading. So I'm going to ask your patience while I read two student letters. And I promise you, this is not a shameless brag. It is information that is, I promise, germane to our discussion today. So the first letter is from a student who graduated about 5 years ago and recently wrote me, "Hi, Professor, how are you? I hope you're keeping well in these crazy new times. Over the last few years, I've worked with and met a ton of bright people, many of whom graduated from big name schools. When I think about my own success, though, it's not about the name of my school or my degree or the amount I paid for my degree. Instead, it always comes back to my comm arts coursework. Your immensive courses, emphasis on networking and internships were pivotal for my growth. Without those stepping stones, I truly don't know where I would be today. Specifically, I often think about these courses, all of which you taught: social media marketing, public relations, event planning and crisis management, and communication skills in business. I promise I'm making this short. Social media and PR courses allowed me to gain hands-on experience with local businesses. Personally, I think that sort of immensive coursework is more valuable than anything you can get from a textbook. Moreover, I ended the semester with tangible experience to put on my resume, thus allowing me to land corporate internships." Skipping some things. I think every student should be required to take communication skills in business, from mock interviews to presentation skills to cover letters, and everything I did in that class made the postgraduate job application process a little less daunting. I continue to use templates from that course when I clean up my resume. Megan is a social media manager and director for a company called Contently. Second letter from a student that just completed the spring semester. "Hi, Professor Winship. I just thought I'd email with some exciting news I received this morning. I had my follow-up phone call with a recruiter from Bloomberg offering me the global data internship position this summer. I'm absolutely over the moon with this news and so relieved after a stressful and anxious few days of waiting. Thank you for the amazing interview section of our communication skills and business class. I wouldn't have aced those interviews the way that I did without it. The recruiter commented twice on how the interviewers were impressed with all of my responses to their questions and my passion to work for Bloomberg. So thank you again." I think that all educators in this room or anyone associated with the education process can agree that one of our most rewarding aspects, maybe the most rewarding aspect of our role, is when we hear from our students or we watch our students succeed and navigate their journey in what I call the real world, the world that really begins and the learning that begins once they go out or once they leave our college or campuses, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that sense of reward and some of the things that we can do to help us get to students and reach students in these types of ways. But before we do that, we would be remiss if we didn't just thank, first and foremost, all of you for showing up today to listen to us and our session. And we also want to thank Stu Kent for this wonderful platform that brings educators together to share best practices. And I guess thirdly, we are so thankful for the opportunity to co-author a courseware that we believe can make a difference in our students' lives and your students' lives, and hopefully help you to get some of the results that we have been very fortunate to get from our students. So yes, we are married, and yes, we work together, and yes, we still like each other, which is sort of unusual, but definitely refreshing. And as we sat down to just practice, we'll say that word, or put together first and foremost our talk for today, we thought, oh, this is going to be easy. We both understand what experiential learning is, or experiential education is. Needless to say, we had what I will call a spirited conversation around the definition of experiential learning and how And we were surprised to see how very and vastly different those definitions were, not only in terms of what we hold as definitions, but both what our respective institutions are using to define experiential learning. So I'm going to now turn this conversation over to my co-author and partner in life, partner in book and business and life. And he'll explain a little bit more about where we arrived and why we want to start with just this understanding of what it is we want to talk about in reference to definitions and terms. And maybe at the end, we can talk about what your universities or institutions are referring to when they say experiential learning activities or service learning activities.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, first, though, I'm going to actually take a somewhat of a detour and offer some context for how we kind of ended up at this point in time and space, I guess. And I'm a big
deep. That's very deep.
I'm a big believer in context, and I will say, or I have to, I guess, confess that surprisingly and sadly, I have never received a single email from a student thanking me for all the context that I have offered. So maybe I'm way off base here, but I am a firm believer in context. And here the context is that both Elaine and I arrived in the educational world from a non-traditional route. We both went from college into the corporate world, and we spent quite a long time there. I was in the corporate world for over 2 decades. Elaine was in the corporate world for a decade and a half. And a significant part of the latter parts of those careers, so almost all of Elaine's 15 years and a good 15 years of my time, were spent in training and development activities. So employee training, employee development, helping people learn to do things, figure out ways to do them better, solve problems, apply skills, hone skills, master skills, all of those things. So we came into the educational world with kind of this inclination to already look for opportunities to explore those areas and leverage those areas. And Elaine teaches communications, I teach business. There's some crossover, obviously, with this particular course, business communication, which is perfect. But of course, in both of those areas, the majority of the courses, if not every course in those areas, offers opportunity to move into those kind of skill-based, application-based exercises and assignments, which was perfect. So it really kind of dovetailed with what we did. And it has always been and continues to be an exciting aspect to what we do. But I think that in particular, the BizCom, whether at Elaine's school, they call it communication skills and business. In my school, we call it business communication. Regardless of what you call it, that course is just seemingly custom made for this approach. So now context over, we'll go back to where Elaine started, which was this somewhat difference of opinion in turn, or possibly even a misunderstanding of quote unquote experiential learning. And it falls into, at least for us, that category of just a label that gets applied, and you start applying it without ever really questioning what it is. And then when you're actually going to talk about it and you say, maybe we should make sure that we really know what we're talking about, sometimes you end up with some kind of surprising realizations or revelations in it. And this, for us at least, falls into one of them. So for those of you in our audience who are experiential learning experts, this is probably going to bore you to tears, but it'll only 45 seconds, 60 seconds of it. For those of you who do not, though, have any experience with experiential learning or really don't have a sense of what it is, well, we figured it was a good idea to kind of dive into that. So we're going to share our screen here and launch into kind of professor mode, as so many of us do. Wow, we're at ProfCon. Oh, here we are. Okay, so we'll move from this. And what we found is that and as Elaine said earlier, what our schools have been labeling as experiential learning in many of the cases is not, in fact, experiential learning by the kind of textbook definition or the definition of the David Kolb, who put, I think, is credited with experiential learning. So it's really, we have to take a step back and expand into this concept of experiential education, right? So you see here, any part of the education process that occurs when you infuse direct experience or opportunities for experience into what you do falls under this much larger umbrella of experiential education. And many of the things that are mislabeled as experiential learning are in fact experiential education. So simply because a course has a hands-on component or a service learning component or any sort of experiential component that goes beyond almost your standard assignment, discussion, exercise, it's experiential education, not necessarily experiential learning. To be experiential learning, which is a much narrower kind of subset of experiential education, there has to be a component in there where it moves beyond just experience or application, and there is an opportunity for the student to reflect upon that experience, make some or draw some or arrive at some conclusions based upon that reflection, and then have the opportunity to incorporate that into follow-up actions, which for the most part, because of those reflections, should be different. Right? They may be drastically different or slightly different. And I guess in certain cases, there may be no difference, right? I reflect and say, hey, it was perfect. I can't see any way to change it. I would say rarely, but that's where it is. So the good news, at least for us, was that the examples that we came into kind of in our head within our BizCom world are in fact experiential learning, but some of the other examples that we would have possibly thrown out there or leaned upon, whether it was in my management courses or my human resource management courses, or some of Elaine's like public relations, social media marketing, depending upon the specifics of that exercise or assignment, would be more like experiential education than experiential learning. So, and I did not properly cite David Kolb there at the bottom with his quote about the 2 goals in the experiential learning process.
Minus 10 points.
Yeah, so I am going
citing.
to be on academic probation for
yes,
that,
you will be.
but
Plagiarism.
I will beg your forgiveness. So for those who did not know experiential learning, again, for the visual aspect of it there, a way to say that once again, it's kind of a 4-step process here, where you see that in the red at the top, red arrow, it starts with the experience and then the student reflects upon it. They take that reflection and there's some thinking and some kind of mental grappling that goes on there as they decide, what does this mean? What should I change? What should I do more of, less of, all of those things? And then again, change that into action. And of course, if you only do one iteration of this, it can still be considered experiential learning. But if you offer more than one opportunity to do it, obviously you are offering much more and much greater opportunity to do more. So if the students have the opportunity to act and reflect, and our last piece in terms of kind of exploring just the non-specific stuff to us is what experiential learning does expect every learner to do, right? First, be willing to actively engage, because let's face it, I'm assuming most of us, if you've taught more than 5 students in your entire career, have come across that student who was unwilling to actively engage for any of a variety of reasons, right? They have to be able to reflect upon the experience. Again, they may not be capable of it, they may not be willing to do it, or they may not be given the opportunity to do it because the design of the course did not allow that to happen, right? So you as the instructor have to provide that opportunity first. They also have to possess and use analytical skills to conceptualize the experience. So again, do they have problem-solving analytical skills, and do they have decision-making and problem-solving skills to use new ideas that they gain from the experience? So it does take a certain level of competence and ability on the student side, again, working with the instructor. So we're going to now go into, or I'll go into, or are you going into? One of us is going to go into.
Together.
Yeah.
Why not? We're in this together.
We have two exercises or examples here from our business communication courses that really meet the criteria of the experiential learning. And the first one is directly related to the two emails that Elaine sent, the one from the student that was like, hey, Bloomberg came through and they were really impressed with our or my interview prowess. And we're really proud of that, because one of the things that we really feel strongly about in terms of business communication is that, first, every college student on the planet, if not every young adult ready to move on with their life,
older adult,
right, could benefit and should benefit from a business communication course done properly. And we have these conversations in our school with students that come in that may take, in my case, the course as an elective, or just because there is nothing else being offered, and they are a graphic design student, or they're planning to be an art student or a history student, and they don't believe that they're going into a quote unquote business related environment. So they don't see any value in this. And what they don't understand, and it's my job to kind of help them to understand, is that this transcends the business world. The ability to effectively communicate is going to be a valuable skill to leverage if you are asking people to donate, if you are asking people to give you a platform with which to share your ideas, your thoughts. So again, in terms of being very excited about this job interview piece, we feel like the majority of our students, the majority of college students, will have to find employment at some point in time. And so we can really give them a very, very strong leg up in making that happen. So with that.
Well, I want to just interrupt in 1 second and say that before we go into these two examples, when we landed in academia and we came from our corporate jobs, we really looked for opportunities to infuse as much experiential learning as possible into our courses. And the two examples we are going to share with you today are rather robust or lengthy. And I want to just preface it or make a disclaimer. They don't all have to be this lengthy.
Well, it is important to acknowledge that they do demand a lot of both preparation, activity, and involvement, but they do consume a lot of class time. So if you have a 14-week semester, sometimes one of these will be hard to get through, much less both of them.
Well, I do both of them. I think they're possible. So additionally, this is a work in progress. Anybody who says, okay, I want to improve my transfer of knowledge. I know all of these things, or I have experience in these areas, and I have this wonderful textbook or student coursework but I want to be able to transfer the knowledge to my students. These activities are great, but they require a series of, what is it? They're always progressing. They're always morphing and evolving. Right. So just this one example we have done over and over again in different types of ways and variations. But for the most part, it is probably the most successful experiential learning activity, at least that I have been able to share with my students, and then have received such positive feedback from them as they not only just graduate, but also, as I read to you at the start of the session, years after graduation, they're reflecting on this activity and using the skills that they learned through the experience. So it's pretty simple in terms of explanation. Sure, go right ahead.
The handout that is available, I think, inside of this session, or however you access that, does align with what we're going to talk about here. So just
good point.
Off some context.
So you can jump in at any time. We'll do this together. So what do we do around job interviews? We know that this is the most dreaded, one of the most dreaded experiences that any undergraduate will embark upon. Just thinking about having to go on a job interview scares them. And a lot of them operate under the myth that they can't prepare for a job interview once again, a myth that many people hold because they say, oh, there's no way to anticipate what will be asked of me on a job interview. And that's a huge myth that you want to bust. And this particular exercise and the studies behind mock interviewing support the fact that that is indeed a myth. So what we do to begin this experiential activity is offer our students very standard interview questions, both behavioral and situational and standard. And we ask them to work on answering word for word these questions in response to a job ad that they have chosen. So we ask them to look for a job that they would be able to apply for and qualify for upon graduation. What they do is answer these questions word for word, and then they sit down in a mock interview. A lot of times it's with me. So I take off my professor hat and I put on the interviewer hat. Go ahead.
Yeah, you jumped ahead
Oh.
just a little too much.
I'm trying to work inside of time.
I know we're
We only
running out
have
of
5
time,
minutes.
but just to make sure that
that
they understand that we understand the experiential learning aspect of that. You move too quickly. With the students respond or put together their
I give them
responses to the interview questions, and then that is submitted, and then there is detailed feedback upon each of those. And of course, that then offers the student the opportunity to reflect upon the feedback that they've received, play with that, and then make some decisions. No, I reject your feedback.
Right.
And in fact, this is the answer that I would want to still offer. I see what you mean. I'm going to incorporate that. And then they are encouraged to move into this, to act upon those changes when they move into this next round, which is the mock interview. Okay, so now
right, that was a big piece I forgot there.
Yeah.
That's why we work so well together.
Yeah.
So yeah, after they get my feedback, they're supposed to go back to their answers and change them. So they think about it, they act on that, and then they show up for a face-to-face interview where I act as the interviewer. I ask them the questions in real time. I record that session with them. The class is observing and evaluating the interviewer, and then they go back again, watch their recording, think about their answers, and put some more, I would say, edits and evaluation on top of what they've done, and they make changes. And then we actually mock interview again with some recruiters that we bring in, and sometimes the Career Center will help out, and they have the opportunity again to think about the feedback they've received, make some changes, and then they're released really into the real world and they start interviewing for their internships and their jobs. One of the things we do is help students at any point in their college career benefit from this, because even freshmen and sophomore are looking for internships while your juniors and your seniors are beginning their official job search. So this is an amazing opportunity for the student. It's a lot of work for the professor, but it pays off.
It can pay off.
It can pay off if done well.
Invest, and if they do in fact try.
Let's go into our next one. We only have 3 minutes left.
Wow, that's great. So the second one.
And you thought we wouldn't have enough to say.
Yeah, well,
you can take this one.
We talk too much. So anyway,
this is my favorite one.
Yeah,
so.
A similar approach in terms of presentations, right? Because business communication does oral and written communication. So in this case, the multiple opportunities for experiential learning iterations within those assignments, because the student first designs a presentation a bit on a topic, depending upon what it is, we choose, they choose. And then they receive feedback on that, both on the design, but also the content of it, the structure and organization of it. And again, they have the opportunity to reflect upon that and make decisions based upon that before they come out and they actually deliver that content, where again, there is peer feedback, there is instructor feedback around that they are encouraged to take, incorporate, play with and incorporate, and then move into the next delivery of that. So as you can see, because I know we're running out of time, that again, they can consume a lot of time and they can take a lot of effort on both student and instructor part, but they have, in particular, the interviewing one.
And now I have to interview,
great
I have to
results.
interrupt you. You skipped a step.
I did.
Yeah. So
Intentionally.
in this, oh, you did. Okay.
No, it wasn't.
Just to
Go.
save time.
I was lying.
You're
to
lying.
Save face.
It's
Yeah.
communication.
Go ahead.
Communication. All right. So what we do with this, and I'll tell you really quickly, I have my students in class design a 2-minute presentation on a favorite vacation or one of the seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall. They sit together, they put it together in class. I offer each team feedback on that particular presentation. Yes, this is done in one class. Then as a team, the group gets up after they've reflected on my feedback. They amend their presentations. They stand up as a team, present this 2-minute presentation on the 3 things they love about winter or their 3 favorite holidays in the fall. I then give them feedback on that team presentation. They take that, they think about it, they act on it, and they prepare for the next class, their own individual presentation. Again, only around 2 minutes long. I always use a favorite vacation, pulling the topic away from anything very heavy so that they can focus on just learning the concepts behind designing and delivering a presentation. They come back to class then in the next session and they deliver a presentation, or not the next session, a couple of sessions, and they deliver their own individual presentation on their favorite vacation, again, being recorded so they can go back afterwards and read student evaluations that are watching them and evaluating, watch their own recording, assess what they did well, what they want to improve upon, and then they make changes. And then they go out of this classroom to other speaking opportunities, which makes it a really rich experiential learning process because we have students who then participate in, we have one group that participates in the federal challenge. So the Fed challenge, where they evaluate the market and present at the Federal Reserve in New York City. Or we have a group of students who put together student presentations to present to the board of directors of the college, or presentations to present for the student activity center or group or government group. So I think at this point we're 1 minute over, but this is another example of how experiential learning, or an example of an experiential learning activity that has so much potential. It can be done quickly, it can be made robust, and it can reach far beyond the classroom, even during the time frame of your 14-week semester. So we will end now with a quote by Aristotle: for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we
learn by doing
we
them.
learn by doing them. And I think all of us are students of experiential learning because we've all learned how to become better at what we do as educators by constantly teaching our different courses over and over again. And we hope that some of our examples that we shared today will help you infuse your coursework with what we like to call activities that energize the students and bring life to what is a pretty, well, not Stukent. Stukent has a 2-dimensional or sometimes 3-dimensional when you're doing the simulation methodology, but the traditional textbooks are flat. They're 1-dimensional, and these experiential learning activities really give some dimension to your coursework. I see a lot of questions. So Darlene, you said you were going to go through those with us.
Yes, we got a question. Feel free, everybody, to keep putting them in for the Winships. It was so fun to watch your dynamic as you were presenting, which is a great dynamic, by the way.
I have to apologize. I see that at 12:10, you said our slides weren't showing. Did they begin to show, or was
They
No,
did.
you were just I think it was communication. He was speaking for too long.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's
so
fine.
great. Okay.
We got it all worked out. It was a great presentation. We have a question about, like, when you're creating these experiences or assignments, you mentioned they were really robust. Do you have like abbreviated versions, or do you feel like when you abbreviate the project, it like takes away from the value?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think I did a good job in the last activity. So Tom, when he does the presentation experiential learning activity, he makes it span over many classes. I don't. I'm very quick with it. I actually time it. So I teach my students the design model, and then in that same hour and 20-minute class, I break them into small work teams and I say, okay, it's your turn now. Apply the model to a very easy topic. Like I say, I do winter, spring, summer, the Super Bowl, if it's that time of year. And I tell them, you have essentially 10 minutes to put together a 2-minute presentation. So that's a quick activity, and students are immediately like, wait, what, we have to do this now? And they start talking and they start getting excited and they start really focusing on that design model if they'd been sleeping when I presented it before. And by the end of that class, they've learned the design model for a presentation. They have demonstrated, or they've synthesized it, they've demonstrated it, and they've received feedback on it in an hour and 20 minutes. So you can take that activity and blow it out and have them work on a presentation for as long as you want. But the next part, when they come back and do it individually, repeating that process, it's a little bit more involved. But no, the answer is no. I mean, let's say you're talking about listening. How can we do something really quick to show how hard it is to be a listener in the middle of a lecture? Even playing what I like to do, that old-fashioned telephone game where, because of COVID, you can't whisper in students' ears anymore. But I bring a student into the hallway, I tell them something, I have them stay out there, and students filter in and out of the hallway. And it's a really quick 6 or 7 minute activity. And the difference between what I told them in the beginning of that activity and at the end is comical and funny, but it proves that point that listening is difficult and so much is lost along the way. So there's an example of an impactful experiential learning activity that we can build upon later. I guess that would be experiential education, but
Right.
whatever, we're not going to mince definitions at this point because I want to get through as many questions as I can. So we have a variety of these types of activities. And the wonderful thing about them is you, as the professor, as the educator, can make them as long or as short as you want them to be. And I can't stress the value in this. So in some of my classes, or a lot of my classes, I think the number one way to do this effectively is to reach out to someone in the real world, a client, a business, somebody that needs help in the area of communications, and ask them to be a sort of guinea pig. I shouldn't say that in this climate, but for your students to work with during the course of a semester. And you can build all sorts of activities on or around working with a real client. And I keep going. So
Yeah, that's question one.
sorry,
Okay.
I'm a blabberer. I'm a communication professor. Can I say?
That's all right. I was a communication student at one point, so I think it's just in all communication people's blood. But it's a great answer. Do you have examples, since you guys did just come out with business communication college through career or through college and career? I know the title.
Okay, I get it wrong too.
Are there some experiential learning assignments in your courseware that you'd like to speak to? I know you mentioned you have a handout for this session, so everybody associated with the session, you'll be able to download that handout from the Winships and hopefully be able to use it in your courses. Sorry, there was a question in there.
Well,
too.
the interviewing piece is part of a project, a recommended project that is part of the courseware, and it includes, not just the
Several.
interviewing piece, everything through the entire job search out through accepting or rejecting a position. So this is part of it. The presentations.
But just so you know, that project is just a series of smaller and larger experiential or components. So for example, we don't just tell students I'm sorry, I'm taking over, but we don't just tell students to grab a job ad and bring it into class. We have them choose a job ad, think about it. Why would they choose it? What is it about? Why can they apply for it? And then we do an exercise called dissecting the job ad, which is experiential because they're looking at that job ad, and like biology in the old days, again, I keep talking about animals. I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that, but we used to dissect various organisms, right, to learn how they work. We have a whole experiential activity around just dissecting a job ad and thinking about the different components and how the student can leverage those to increase success while applying and get some insight into an organization, because there's so much that we miss as we look at job ads. So that's just one piece of a large project that students can, or professors can use either individually or all together to make a culminating midterm or final project. So long answer. Did I do well?
Yeah, you did great. Many
Thanks.
of the assignments in throughout the courseware are designed to be experiential. Probably not all experiential learning, but at least experiential education.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we're very excited for the courseware. Chandler just posted a link where you can go learn more about this courseware and learn about Tom and Elaine there too. So yeah, oh, I just clicked on it. So now I'm out of the thing. Hold on. I'm back. All right. Go check it out. It'll be awesome. If we have any other questions coming in, just feel free to put them in the chat. But I think if you guys want to speak to something that you have done with your students that I mean, Elaine, you were talking about students responding to you saying how great these experiences were, but like, I know for me, any classes that I took in college, whenever there was this experiential component, that it really did impact me. And so have you had those experiences where there was like a specific assignment that you saw really take a student to a next level?
Yeah, and again, it just seems like a shameless brag, but, and I don't mean it to be. So I think that most of my students who participate in these activities all express just gratitude for them, and they are more successful in terms of landing that first position. But then, as I read in the beginning of the session, they're contemplating the experiential learning process is continuing as they move through their careers or move up in their current role or take on new roles. And I think that's really gratifying. One of the things that I do, and I found great success with it, and Tom has done as well, is, and I mentioned it before, is I don't have to reach out anymore. At this point, my reputation in terms of what my students will do for nonprofits has made it so that I have to choose out of many nonprofits every academic year to work with. So, for example, I reached out, or this organization called Baking Memories for Kids reached out to me and asked me if I would have my social media, public relations, and communication. It's communication, well, we call it not business communication, it's called communication skills in business. Students work with them. And I said, of course, yes. And this is an organization that provides these wonderful opportunities for students with terminal illness to go to Florida-themed amusement parks. So it's similar to Make-A-Wish Foundation, but on a smaller scale and right in our community. In terms of I mean the college community. And having a client who's willing to come into these classes, get interviewed, allow my students to do social media marketing projects for them, create public relation plans, and actually, Tom has done this too, help their internal employees learn communication skills. So for example, I had a small group of students from business communication go in and help folks inside of that nonprofit work on presentation skills. I mean, just think about that. So they learn presentation skills in class, they practiced them, they were evaluated, they practiced again, and now they're helping a nonprofit employees who want to be able to go out and talk about this nonprofit. They're helping them hone their presentation skills. So it's an amazing opportunity when you reach out to your community and ask. For-profit and nonprofits in this day and age will never turn away free help.
Well, for instance, my course a few semesters ago, I worked with, we did a service learning component where we worked with a local nonprofit that benefited teen moms, and they obviously offered them support and just everything from how to be a parent to how to kind of deal with and navigating this vastly changed world in these young women's lives. And what they were at a point where they need to begin to work. Right, this nonprofit will help them, and they have connections that can place them with opportunities for employment, but they still need to go through putting together a cover message and or a resume. They have to be able to sit for an interview. They have to be able to speak to what they like, what they don't like, what they believe they can do, what if they feel like they can fit in. So my students were tasked with taking this content that they were just learning, and by the end of the semester being able to comprehend it enough that they could speak competently to it and regurgitate that to a group of people who really kind of needed that.
Right.
And we have a standing invitation to come back. Right. So, and I think the students, both, they find it rewarding. Number one,
Overtime.
Yeah, my students are the same age as many of those people there. So it was rewarding. I think there was a little bit of aspects of terror to that too. Like, hey, that could be me. And I may be on the other side of this if I made different decisions or if different things happen in life. So there's really a lot there to be done.
We call it a win-win situation, but it's a win-win. The students feel good about giving back, but for you as professors, as educators, you have an unlimited resource for creating these experiential learning activities, just about on every single thing you've taught in your class. And we are so passionate about this. Anyone who's interested in our courseware or any of these activities, we would love to speak with you. Virgil, I don't want to ignore your question. You asked what type of students take this course. Are they all comm students? In my school, every single business student and communication student is required to take business communications. At this point, it is being discussed at the presidential level for all students to take this course. And we're even thinking about doing a pre-summer session or entering freshmen take this course or some variation of this course. In Tom's schools, same thing. So it is a course that can be for any student at any level of their college career. And I know we're over time. Beneficial. So thank you, everyone. I know it's 12:46 and we went over by a minute, which is good for us. We're always going over. Darlin, back to you. Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah.
Or hosting this.